Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are still in the chapter Memory, Ego, and Self-Experience, page 541, beginning with the line, "Our surface existence."
We read. Our surface existence is only a surface, and it is there that there is the full reign of the ignorance. To know, we have to go within ourselves and see with an inner knowledge. All that is formulated on the surface is a small and diminished representation of our secret greater existence. The immobile self in us is found only when the outer mental and vital activities are quieted. For since it is seated deep within and is represented on the surface only by the intuitive sense of self-existence and misrepresented by the mental, vital, physical ego sense, its truth has to be experienced in the mind's silence. But also, the dynamic parts of our surface being are similarly diminished figures of greater things that are there in the depths of our secret nature. The surface memory itself is a fragmentary and ineffective action pulling out details from an inner subliminal memory which receives and records all our world experience, receives and records even what the mind has not observed, understood, or noticed. Our surface imagination is a selection from a vaster, more creative, and effective subliminal image-building power of consciousness. A mind with immeasurably wider and more subtle perceptions, a life energy with a greater dynamism, a subtle physical substance with a larger and finer receptivity, are building out of themselves our surface evolution. A psychic entity is there behind these occult activities, which is the true support of our individualization. The ego is only an outward false substitute, for it is the secret soul that supports and holds together our self-experience and world experience. The mental, vital, physical, external ego is a superficial construction of nature. It is only when we have seen both ourself and our nature as a whole, in the depths as well as on the surface, that we can acquire a true basis of knowledge. That completes the chapter. And we'll look at what he's saying, we'll identify the words, and then we'll go on to the next part. So, to remind you that he has been examining consciousness, and why? Because he saw that, as he said, there is the observer, there is the observed, and there is observation. So, or you can put it as the knower, the to be known, and the knowledge. So, he has been examining knowledge comes from consciousness. So, he has been examining consciousness. And he has examined two main features of consciousness: imagination, memory, and ego. And he found very interesting things last time we read. Sometimes the memory may go, but the ego may remain. This is what happens in old age. When you are in your last chapter of your life, okay, then memory fails. And Sometimes it can fail even earlier, but that's another matter. But the ego does not go. The ego remains. If you excite them or charge them with something, they'll react egoistically. On the other hand, memory, ego may disappear, but memory may remain. This is what happens when a man is transformed spiritually. So you are a normal man, and then you have the experience of the self, and then you get stationed in the self. You are a completely new man. You had anger, jealousy, possessiveness, selfishness. Now you have none of these things. So you are a completely new person. Memory is there. I was such a person, but I am now this. But no ego. So interesting, the ego, the memory, and what was the other one? The imagination. So these three things are totally separate. And your personality is helped by the memory as well as ego, but also what Sri Aurobindo calls a coordinating mind, which coordinates the experiences of yesterday with those of today, and will do so again with the experiences of tomorrow. So now he is telling us that our surface, which is our body-mind life, that's a surface. And that surface is very small part of you. We are part of the universe. There is a constant relation between the universe and the individual. And the image of the sea and the wave becomes very interesting. The wave rises, goes for a certain time, disappears. This is the individual. But the universe is there all the time. The sea is there all the time. So the universe is there. The universe gives you a body, a vital and a mind. And after some time, it dies out. But the individual is still there. Another individual, you take another wave comes up, you have another life. So the individuality is always there. Wave after wave are coming. And the universe is there all the time like the sea. Okay? So now he is telling us that that's a very small part. Our body-mind life is a very small part. So what is there beyond that? There is a subconscious and an inconscient. There is an intraconscious and there is a superconscious. So if you want real knowledge, you have to go into these areas, the secret areas, into yourself and above yourself. I'll read each sentence and it will be clear. Our surface existence is only a surface, and it is there that there is the full reign of the ignorance. So long as you are identified with your body-mind life, you are bound to be in ignorance. The ignorance vanishes when you are not bound with your body-mind life, you are not identified with the body-mind life, but you are now outside your body and you are in the self. Then note interestingly that if the psychic comes forward, there is still ignorance. There is only a purification if the psychic comes forward, but no true spiritual knowledge. The spiritual knowledge can come only when you go above to the self. Okay? So to know, we have to go within ourselves and see with an inner knowledge. All that is formulated on the surface is a small and diminished representation of our secret greater existence. The secret greater existence is sea, and the wave is a small representation of the sea. Exactly in the same way, you are a small representation of the universe.
But Sri Aurobindo says, to know, we have to go within ourselves.
Yes.
But within, you said only above ourselves.
He uses the word within in a very interesting way.
Okay.
He means also above. Okay? Because he uses the word within in the sense of something which is not on the surface. Because the self is not really within, the self is above. Okay? So, sometimes he uses these words, but sometimes he is not. So, we have to go within ourselves and see with an inner knowledge. All that is formulated on the surface is small and diminished representation of our secret greater existence. the immobile self in us is found only when the outer mental and vital activities are quieted. Because you remember we discussed that beautiful birthday message to Champaklal. So, the problem and the solution. A veil behind the heart, a lid over the mind, divide us from the divine. Love and devotion rend the veil, you can go into yourself. In the silence of the mind, the lid thins and vanishes. So, everything has to become quiet. The veil has to be broken when there is perfect equality and samatha. Otherwise, the vital is all the time saying, I like, I don't like. This is good, that is bad. So, there is a movement, and the movement is the veil. So, when you have neither good nor bad, there is no movement, and there is transparency, you can go in. Similarly, your thoughts are the lid. And when there are no thoughts, the lid thins and vanishes, and you can go. So, that is what he is saying here. The immobile self in us, not the word immobile. The self is immobile, not the psychic being. The psychic being is your true being in manifestation. Self is outside manifestation. So, the self is mobile, it is growing. The self doesn't grow, it is constant, fixed, immobile. The immobile self in us is found only when the outer mental and vital activities are quieted. For since it is seated deep within and is represented on the surface only by the intuitive sense of self-existence and misrepresented by the mental, vital, physical ego sense, its truth has to be experienced in the mind silence. Now note, he is talking of immobile self, but he says within.
Yes, yes.
So, the word within is, we should not read Sri Aurobindo or anything for that matter with a very rigid mind. If you do that, then you are likely to make mistakes. So, what he is saying, you have to quiet the mind and the vital. For since it is seated deep within and is represented on the surface only by the intuitive sense of a self-existence. It would be nice to see what he means by the intuitive sense of a self-existence. When you are a child of 3, when you are a child of 5, 7, 10, and now you are an adult man, you and I are now 80 years old, but we still think, we have changed completely. Our ideas have changed, our feelings have changed, our emotions have changed, our body has changed. Yet we feel that that is what I was. I am not changed, I am the same person. So that's the intuitive sense of self-existence.
Intuitive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Intuitive sense of self-existence. I am the same person. Okay, so. And misrepresented by the mental, vital, physical ego sense, misrepresented. Because you don't know your psychic and you don't know yourself. So, you mistake it for this ego. The ego is thinking that I am this. I am the person. Its truth has to be experienced in the mind silence. But also, the dynamic parts of our surface being are similarly diminished figures of greater things. Srinath is saying dynamic parts. Which are the dynamic parts? Whatever is moving is dynamic. So, our body is certainly moving. Even without my movement, the body is moving. Blood is circulating, my digestion is going on. So, there is a movement there. The vital is constantly moving, having desires or not, and the mind is moving. So, these are the outer parts are the dynamic parts. Okay? But also the dynamic parts of our surface being are similarly diminished figures of greater things that are there in the depths of our secret nature. Now we are using the word depths. So you mustn't think that it is below. It's depth. Okay, so the psychic is within and the self is above. The surface memory itself is a fragmentary and ineffective action pulling out details from an inner subliminal memory which receives and records all our world experience, receives and records even what the mind has not observed understood or noticed. This is something interesting. This subliminalness is recording everything, which comes up sometimes in dreams. A very minor detail in life, okay, it becomes an important thing in your dream. So, this is what he's saying, and this is also the fact on which hypnotism is possible, because everything is recorded inside. See, you may have a problem with, let's say, heights. This is what is called vertigo, no? You have a problem with heights. So, the psychologist will try to, or the psychiatrist, whatever, psychiatrist you pronounce in American, he will regress you downwards. Now you are 80 years old, tell me what you are, after hypnotizing you, he will take you to 70, he will take you to 60, 70, and he will go on until he will ask you to talk about your experiences. Then when he comes to this problem of the fear of vertigo, then he will suggest to you that this fear is nothing and it is gone. So the subliminal is used by the psychiatrist to cure your whatever problems you have. Okay? So, it records everything, nothing is not recorded. Records all.
And this record is always in the Akashic records?
Pardon?
Is it always in the Akashic records where it's
yes,
recorded?
Akashic record is exactly the subliminal. That's right. And the subliminal is universal as well as individual.
Yes, yes.
Just like yourself is individual as well as universal. Okay. So, our surface imagination is a selection from a vaster, more creative and effective subliminal image building power of consciousness. So, he is telling you what is memory and what is imagination. They are very small things. But if you go inside, the imagination can access anything and the memory also can access anything. A mind with immeasurably wider and more subtle perceptions, a life energy with a greater dynamism, a subtle physical substance with a larger and finer receptivity are building out of themselves our surface evolution. He is talking here of the inner mind, inner vital, inner physical. The inner physical is often also referred to as the subtle physical. So, when you go there, your senses you are not using. So, one experience I read about a man who went into the subtle physical and he said the colors of the physical world, I am not using my senses now and the senses are defective. The colors of everything, flowers, waves, whatever he is seeing are brilliant colors. So, that is when you go into your subtle physical. And the inner vital is full of power and the inner mind is full of knowledge. So, they build your outer nature, but while the building is going on, there is limitation. The inner mind becomes the outer mind, the inner vital becomes the outer vital, and the body, subtle body becomes the gross body. That is what he is saying. A psychic entity is there behind these occult activities, which is a true support of our individualization. The ego is only an outward false substitute for it. The ego is only an outward false substitute, for it is the secret soul that supports and holds together our self-experience and world experience. Self-experience is what I mean, my thoughts, my sensations and my feelings and my desires and my emotions. That is the inner. The world experience is what I am experiencing with others. The mental, vital, physical, external ego is a superficial construction of nature. Note the word construction. That which is constructed will also be destroyed. So, your body has been constructed by nature, it will be destroyed at the end of your life. Similarly with your vital and the mind. In next life you are going to get a new mind, a new vital and a new body. Okay, so superficial construction of nature. It is only when we have seen both ourself and our nature as a whole, and in the depths as well as on the surface, that now he's using the word depths. So depths, but he's meaning the self. Okay, so that we can acquire a true basis of knowledge. So the next chapter is this knowledge. How many types of knowledge are there, and what are they?
I want to ask about karma
Yeah,
in this instance.
yeah.
If the vital is gone in the new birth, the mind is new, where is the past
Everything
experience?
that is done and experienced is recorded in the subliminal.
Yes.
So the karma also is part of that. It is recorded, it doesn't disappear. Whatever you have done is recorded.
And it will be in the new
Yes.
the new being.
It will, yeah, it will there. The new being is only the outer surface.
Okay.
The house is the same, only the walls have been changed. So the karma applies. The karma does not apply when you cease to identify yourself with your body, mind, life. That's very easy to understand. You are a very good friend of mine, and if you are suffering, I too suffer a bit because I am identified with you. But if I am totally separated from you and you are a stranger and you suffer, I am not going to suffer. So identification is what gives you the ignorance. So if your soul is separated from your body, mind, life, the body, mind, life will have to undergo the karma, but not the soul. The soul is free. That is the reason why even the greatest spiritual avatars also have to undergo the consequences in the physical world. Raman Maharshi had cancer, Ramakrishna had cancer, okay. Vivekananda had diabetes, so that continues. This is, the law of karma continues at the lower level. At the lower level, there is fixity and rigidity. Karma is fully operative in the physical world, as science knows. Science knows there is causality. To every event, there is a cause and there is a result. So that is karma.
So we move on to the next.
Yes. Knowledge
Chapter.
by identity and separative knowledge. We looked at this in the last two classes, but before we start reading, I'll give you the overall picture so that it's very easy to understand. There are 4 types of knowledge. At the lowest level, our knowledge is experienced through the senses. If my senses are not there, I will not know the world, I will not be able to experience. But I will be able to experience within myself what is there, I can experience. So, knowledge by through the senses is what Sri Aurobindo calls separative indirect knowledge. Indirect because between you and what you want to know are the senses. So it is indirect through the senses. And also separative because what you are seeing outside yourself is separate from you. Okay? To make it easier, I am seeing you, I am only seeing your outer nature and I am seeing you through my senses. So that's indirect separative knowledge. Now my consciousness goes to the self. Okay? Now I am not using senses. I am using subtle senses. So the knowledge is direct, but still separate. Your thoughts are your thoughts, not mine. So it is direct, not through senses, because I can see your thoughts, I can see your emotions.
But still separative.
It is still separate, it is yours. So the 4th level, the 4th one is perfect identity. I become you. So your experiences are my experiences. And Sri Aurobindo says that there is a 3rd one, which is knowledge by identity at a slightly lower level. That's the 3rd one. So this is what he is going to describe. I am reading the quotations. They see the self in the self by the self. Okay, so where there is duality, there other sees other Other hears, touches, thinks of, knows other. But when one sees all as the self, by what shall one know it? It is by the self that one knows all this that is. All betrays him who sees all elsewhere than in the self. For all this that is the Brahman. All beings and all this that is are this self. The self-existent has pierced the doors of sense outward. Therefore, one sees things outwardly and sees not in one's inner being. Rarely a sage desiring immortality, his sight turned inward, sees the self face to face. Now note also here, you are turning inwards, but it is a self. So he is using the words a little in a subtly plastic manner. I read the last one. There is no annihilation of the seeing of the seer, the speaking of the speaker, the hearing of the hearer, the knowing of the knower, for they are indestructible. But it is not a second or other than and separate from himself that he sees. It is, I am reading that again, but it is not a second or other than and separate from himself that he sees, speaks to, hears, knows. Just now what we discussed is all there very clearly in all these things. Okay, so if you are identified with the self, you are identified with everything in the cosmic consciousness. Everything is within you or you are in everything. And if you are at our level, then you are mistaken and you are deceived. That's what he's saying. Just once again. We read the first para?
Yes.
Our surface cognition, our limited and restricted mental way of looking at ourself, note the lowercase self, ourself, at our inner movements and at the world outside us and its objects and happenings, is so constituted that it derives in different degrees from a fourfold order of knowledge. The original and fundamental way of knowing, native to the occult self in things, is a knowledge by identity. The second, derivative, is a knowledge by direct contact associated at its roots with a secret knowledge by identity and starting from it, but actually separated from its source and therefore powerful but incomplete in its cognition. The third is a knowledge by separation from the object of observation, but still with a direct contact as its support or even a partial identity. The fourth is a completely separative knowledge which relies on the machinery of indirect contact and knowledge by acquisition, which is yet, without being conscious of it, a rendering or bringing up of the contents of a pre-existent inner awareness and knowledge. A knowledge by identity, a knowledge by intimate direct contact, a knowledge by separative direct contact, a wholly separative knowledge by indirect contact are the four cognitive methods of nature.
What you explained.
Yes, very clear. Okay, so the third one he is calling it a derivative knowledge by identity. Okay. We read the next para?
Yes.
The first way of knowing in its purest form is illustrated in the surface mind only by our direct awareness of our own essential existence. It is a knowledge empty of any other content than the pure fact of self and being, of nothing else in the world. Of nothing else in the world has our surface mind the same kind of awareness. But in the knowledge of the structure and movements of our subjective consciousness, some element of awareness by identity does enter. For we can project ourselves with a certain identification into these movements. It has already been noted how this can happen in the case of an uprush of wrath, which swallows us up, so that for the moment our whole consciousness seems to be a wave of anger. Other passions, love, grief, joy, have the same power to seize and occupy us. Thought also absorbs and occupies. We lose sight of the thinker and become the thought and the thinking. We become the thought and the thinking. But very ordinarily, there is a double movement. A part of ourselves becomes the thought or the passion. Another part of us either accompanies it with a certain adherence or follows it closely and knows it by an intimate direct contact, which falls short of identification or entire self-oblivion in the movement. Quite difficult what he is saying. We'll have to look carefully at it.
But we say the anger is not our anger. It's coming from outside.
Yes, but we identify.
But we identify with it. Yes.
He's talking about the identification.
Yes.
Okay. So, he's saying that the first way of knowing in the purest form is illustrated. He is not saying that when you are experiencing your anger and you become anger, it's only an illustration. It's an example to show you what identification is. Okay? It's not knowledge by identity. You are in ignorance because you are identifying itself with the wrong thing.
Yes.
So, that is the illustration he is saying. The first way of knowing in its purest form is illustrated on the surface mind only by our direct awareness of our own essential existence. I know that I was yesterday, I was 1 year ago, I was 10 years ago, and I will be the same. This is our knowledge by identity. I know myself. Okay. So, that's the direct awareness of our own essential existence. It's a knowledge empty of any other content than the pure fact of self and being. When I'm looking into myself and thinking of myself, nothing else is coming. The world is not coming, nothing else. Okay? So that's what he's saying. or any other than the pure fact of self and being. Of nothing else in the world has our surface mind the same kind of awareness. Except when you are in the cosmic consciousness. But if you are in the cosmic consciousness, you are aware of everything outside as part of yourself. But even when I am in ignorance, I know myself relatively. It's only an illustration. But I know nothing about the physical world when I am concentrating here. I don't know the other as part of myself. That's what is meaning. Okay, so but in the knowledge of the structure and movements of our subjective consciousness, some element of awareness by identity does enter. For we can project ourselves with a certain identification into these movements. So he is saying that the identification is not 100%. Part of you is identifying yourself with your anger, your jealousy, your grief, your joy, but part of it is also separated. That's what he will tell you in the next, see. But in the knowledge of the structure of the movements of our subjective consciousness, some element of awareness by identity does enter. For we can project ourselves with a certain identification into these movements. It has already been noted how this can happen in the case of an uprush of wrath, which swallows us up, so that for the moment our whole consciousness seems to be a wave of anger. But note interestingly that if you are sufficiently objective about yourself, okay, you can watch yourself becoming angry. Normally it happens at the lowest level a little after the event, not at the time of the event. If it's happening at the time of the event, you are not identified, you are up here in the self. You are watching the anger. But when you are at our level, we are not watching it, we are becoming the anger. Okay? So
And when one at this level can feel it was from the outside.
that is very rare.
Is it?
Because then you have to be up and looking at the outside and the inside. Just now he has told you that nothing from the outside is experienced in that way.
Yes.
But when you are in the cosmic consciousness, then you can see the subliminal, see the movements coming from outside also you can see. Then you are not in ignorance. If you can see the things coming from outside, you are already not in ignorance. So, we can make that way uprush of wrath which swallows us up, so that for the moment our whole consciousness seems to be a wave of anger. Note for the moment, because today I got angry, I identified myself with my anger, I justified it. Tomorrow I may be a little more calm and quiet and say, oh, I got angry, I should not have got angry. So you are not identifying yourself with your. So for the moment, see how accurate
For the moment,
language is.
yes.
Okay, so for the moment our whole consciousness seems to be a wave of anger. Other passions, love, grief, joy, have the same power to seize and occupy us. Thought also absorbs and occupies. We lose sight of the thinker and become the thought and the thinking. But very ordinarily, there is a double movement. A part of ourselves becomes the thought or the passion. Another part of us either accompanies it with a certain adherence, that's identification, or follows it closely and knows it by an intimate, direct contact which falls short of identification or entire self-oblivion in the movement. So both the things are possible. You can identify yourself fully, or you can be aware. There is a part in you which identifies itself with it, and a part which is not identifying yourself with it. When you say, I was angry, you are not identifying yourself with it. So I became angry. I was angry, anger is separate from me. So, but when you become anger, then you say, of course language is there, it's a question of language.
Sure.
When you say I was angry, you mean that you identify yourself with your anger. Okay, that's why the word for the moment is so important.
Very important.
Because next day you are not identified, but you know what it is. So, I'll read the summary of what he's saying
Good.
here. Okay, so the first way of knowing, the first way he is talking of identification, can best be illustrated, though defectively, I have added that, okay, by our own awareness of our thought and emotions. Of nothing else in the world are we aware in the same manner as we know ourselves. We become anger when it overpowers us. This power also obtains with love, grief and joy. But the identification is not complete. There is a separation between the knower and the known. Part of us becomes anger and a small part stands back. Identification is not complete. That's what he's saying in the para.
Very good.
So we stop here, and next time we'll read this. This identification is possible.
Okay, this identification. Namaste all.